All right, welcome to the build. So it's moving quickly.
And their product velocity is intense. We're both pretty involved in the LangChain community.
This is going to be an industry, like the whole thing is going to explode.
The hype cycle, it's like just because you hear everybody start talking about these things doesn't necessarily mean it's the right.
Need to go back, find out more because it's really interesting.
We're both obsessed with AI and their entire stack is just pivoted to agents.
The next question that usually comes after that is like, well, I'm fine-tuning an open model.
That's the biggest thing with the latest spec.
An exploding distribution vector.
I'm really excited. I think everybody is. I'm not the only one.
The build.
We're recording Thursday, August the 7th, 9 o'clock Pacific time, and ChatGPT is going to launch in about an hour. But we want to go through GPT open source. I really want you to show me this LangChain open SWE thing that you shared, which seems really cool, and also the deep agent stuff. I have a few things to talk through, and I really am really excited about this concept of basically like agent testing environments, which I want to take you through, which is pretty exciting. Yeah, so let's get into it. Before we do that, how have you been? Just like...
Yeah, good, man. The GPT-OSS, that dropped, a couple days ago. That's been taking up some time on my side. And Tom, you mentioned OpenCode, so I've been diving into that a little bit. And
is it OpenCode? OpenCoder? I still don't know what that is. So yeah, it'd be good for you to kind of give me
OpenCode.
Do you want to pull it up?
And
actually, yeah, let's jump into that first.
All right. Yeah, you just want to start there. So
let's start. There's so much to cover. There's so much to talk about. Let's get into it. So OpenCoder, I found a blog post we'll put in the show notes where basically last week we were covering all the Chinese open source models, and one guy was basically saying, what would it take for me to take my entire stack and put it on some sort of open source personal inference kind of machine? And he basically said, it's very hard and it probably doesn't make any sense. The most cost-effective thing if you want to go this path, in his opinion, is OpenCode plus Qwen3 Coder with some sort of inference partner, right? And I sent that to you.
Right.
And said,
yeah, and that was prior to the release.
Yeah, that was prior to the ChatGPT release, open source. But yeah, so what is OpenCode?
Yeah, I stumbled into it because of you, like I said. But I think a lot of people, if you're starting to hit these limits with Anthropic, Claude Code, have started looking for alternative options. And I've had that, several times. And it wasn't until I ran into this OpenCode where I've really found something I think I can use. And the key here, you can see it on my screen. The key here is all the different providers and all the flexibility that you have. Now, I've only done some light testing with it after configuring, so I can't say that it's on par or better, worse. I've run into some different, what I feel like are issues, like where it doesn't continuously, I have to type continue, resume to keep it moving. I think that's the main thing I found so far. But yeah, other than that, it works pretty well. And honestly, I probably spent more time just configuring it than actually using it as a coding tool. It was right when the GPT-OSS dropped. So that was kind of the focus, getting that set up. And on a related note, Ollama, if that's not obvious, Ollama is compatible with OpenCode. And with the release of GPT-OSS, Ollama released a new service called Turbo. So it's like a cloud-based accelerator that you can use.
So that was really cool. And I want to talk through that when we start talking about the open source GPT launch, because that was a massive boost. I didn't realize. So I've never really gone down the Ollama local path. I'm on a Mac, it's still M4 silicon, but it's like I don't have like a proper, NVIDIA rig PC kind of setup. So I'm thinking about going that path actually, based on I'm just diving really hard into Comfy UI and local diffusion. So I'm actually thinking of splurging and just getting like a spec'd up hardcore, like local NVIDIA kind of machine. But for Ollama in this context, so OpenCode, one of the things that when I looked at this, I was like, well, it's powered by models.dev, which I'd never seen before either. But are you saying you can also integrate it with Ollama? And then when you do Ollama, how do you actually expose it as a service? I've never really gotten that far. Like, exposing it and saying, all right, well, use Ollama locally, or like, how do you actually do that and configure it? Is it hard?
No, it's really simple. You can go to their website and just download your executable or your package and install it. And then it essentially runs in the background. But they also added a desktop app recently, and I don't know exactly when. One day I was just trying to launch Ollama, like the backend service.
Yeah, it was
and
recently.
a desktop app popped
it was
up.
really
I was like,
yeah, it's basically a
and it's
desktop
actually pretty.
app, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's really light. Like you can't upload files or configure MCP servers or anything like that. It's pretty much like pure inference with Ollama. But I found myself using it a couple times. It's kind of cool.
It's really cool for running these models locally. Like I was always running Ollama through the terminal just to test stuff. I've started using LM Studio locally as well.
I've done some with LM in Studio. Yeah, they're very comparable. Yeah, Tom, with Ollama, most people will just install it and then it runs on a certain port on your computer, 11434. And you should just be able to put like localhost and that port and be able to connect to it. If you can't, open your terminal and just type in Ollama space serve, SERVE, and it will, might as well, let me just share my screen and I'll show that to you real quick.
Yeah, that'd be sick actually. Because for
yeah, so I have Ollama already running as a background service. Go ahead.
For a humble vibe coder, it's sort of like not intuitive. It's not as simple as just spinning up cursor. So I think these like local inference things are going to have a problem with adoption, right? Unless this kind of stack gets solved. But yeah, show me. So Ollama server.
Yeah, and also on that note, the reason I'm so excited about this is for a long time I've said can't wait until I can do actual development using local models, and people laugh, and that's a ways off, because the reality is that the open source models you can run on your computer are very, very lightweight in comparison to the state of the art, the OpenAI models that we have. But with the release of this GPT-OSS, it's not quite there, but you know that it will happen very soon. And it actually prompted me, I put myself on the reserve list for the RTX, what is it, DGX, like that micro server. They announced it actually quite a while ago. It was supposed to come out this summer. But it's basically, they're calling it like a supercomputer, and you can hold it in your hand. But that will...
Is that the next gen of the Jetson like microcomputer?
Yeah, it's related. Yeah, it's along those lines. Yep.
DGX Spark.
So
yeah,
the idea, you could have a lot of people today, if they're trying to do local, they'll buy like a bank of Mac Minis or something like that. So when people do that, they're essentially maybe not always running Ollama, but you would set it up basically like a server, and you can use it as a remote endpoint for inference. And actually, there's a really cool company, Web AI, and that's their on-prem solution right now, is a bank of like 10 Mac Minis, and it's basically just acts as a remote server. So let me show you, Tom, first thing before jumping all over the place. I was going to show you how to start Ollama. Like I said, when you install it, it runs in the background, and you should see a little llama icon up in your taskbar. So if that icon is showing, then it's already running as a background service. And if you try to run this command, it will throw an error and say it's already running. So while I'm showing you, I killed that backend service, so it shouldn't be running right now. And then all I have to do is type Ollama serve. And that's still running, I guess.
I love these live demos.
Yeah, man. That's why we do it. Living dangerously.
Living dangerously. Yeah, last week we were talking about like random stuff serving. You're like, just use the activity monitor. I'm like, oh, that's such a dumb idea. And then the whole week I've just been looking at the activity monitor. I'm like, God damn you. And I opened up this morning before our chat and I was like, what is this Python server running? Like, it's just been running. Just some random Python server that Claude created and it's just like still there, still going.
That's hilarious.
By mobile app.
Okay, so this is the desktop app that I mentioned. And Tom, as you can see here, most of these are models that I've downloaded on my computer. And I guess you have to actually, I think you have to have these downloaded for them to even to use the Turbo, the cloud version. But as you can see, I select the 120 version and then I click on this Turbo button. And that's what enables that cloud accelerated booster. It's $20 a month right now. And it seems like a really great deal. Of course, I don't know what kind of limitations there are, as I haven't hit rate limits or anything yet, but I also haven't been using it extensively. But my first observation, Tom, I messaged you and I was like, whoa, this is so fast.
Yeah.
And it is, but I also didn't realize that it was using the cloud accelerator because when I downloaded it, it was enabled by default. So that was a little bit misleading, but it still is incredibly fast. Incredibly fast.
Yeah, so let's back up. Now we'll move on to open source model. We can chat about this. So this has been out for a few days. I've seen a few comments and things like basically it's very cheap. So if you're doing this, obviously you're doing this locally, you've got this turbo thing on, but if you were doing it locally, it's just using electricity, but it's very slow, tokens per second still, like if you're using a regular computer. But if you use something like Grok with a Q, I think it's like 10 cents to 40 cents, right? 10 cents per million tokens, right. 40 cents per million tokens out, like really cheap, really, really cheap. And the benchmarks, I don't know if you want to go open artificial analysis and just check out the benchmarks quickly on a tab. Might be interesting to just highlight. The benchmarks on key like STEM related tests are very good. But then anecdotally, some of the feedback has been basically it's kind of a bit dumb and doesn't have as much embedded knowledge on some of the more generalist stuff. Yeah, so from the anecdotal things that I was hearing people comment on their testing, and then also some of the initial feedback was basically saying this is a strategic placement of the kind of model. So trying to unseat some of these open source research labs out of Asia with a model that's very good at very specific tasks, but not necessarily going to attack or disrupt the ChatGPT experience. So enabling competitors or disrupting that kind of consumer level experience, which is interesting as a strategic move on the back of today's launch of ChatGPT 5, which apparently is just going to smash everything. So this is sort of like a defensive play. It's been in the works for a while. We thought it wasn't going to happen. We thought like potentially they may have backed off a little bit based on Zuckerberg saying that he won't be focusing on open source as much anymore either. So all of that being said, like it looks like an absolute gift, really, based on some of the benchmarks. So if you want to do you mind just go into artificial analysis? We can pull those up quickly and then we can jump into demos like artificial analysis. And then I think it's just their basic evals on the if you go to the homepage, it should be on there. Or yeah, OSS, maybe 120B is probably the best comparison. And you can see where it sits. So speed is like blazing fast compared to Gemini 2.5 Flash. Like, that's pretty incredible. And the cost profile is so low, like absolutely crushing it on cost. And then for a relatively strong model, like it's still behind DeepSeek R1, which is amazing, right? On some of these kind of, this is like a blended, I like the artificial intelligence benchmark because it's just a blended metric. Like it's not like, oh, Amy and blah and blah. It's just like, all right, just give me it's like a meta metric, right? And it's pretty reliable. Now, apparently on the top of that, GPT-5 is just going to smash those ones at the top there. So they've kind of got a really strong contender that's really cheap on the low end. now, which is really cool. Plus, it's also really good at tool calling, apparently. Tool calling, coding, that sort of stuff, which we were talking about when we covered Kimi. Those Asian labs are really going hard at making these models excellent using synthetic data around tool calling and MCP structures, all of those things. So they've obviously like taken the lead from that and said, like, developers, we need to really enable them properly.
Yeah. That's of course, one of the first things I went to test was tool calling and MCP integration. And I feel like I still don't have a great handle on, like temperature field, because I've been using it with like Cloudflare, Grok, locally on my computer, Ollama Turbo, and then another one. So I've actually been using it for all these different providers. And that's where I haven't been quite sure, is this an issue with the provider and the proxy, the way that it's set up? Because my experience has been fairly inconsistent, where at moments I'm like, this isn't very good. And then the next moment I'm just blown away. So.
And I think, so let's cover that, because I think that nuance is important. So a lot of the comments were basically saying, like, this is an open source model, but you're not we collectively are not benefiting from a lot of the infrastructure kind of smoothing that occurs when you actually go in on one of their official models. And I think we underappreciate how much work goes into that, like, application layer that these companies put over the top of our experience for these models. I think that's hitting a lot of people, and they're like, oh, this is kind of crappy in this instance. It's like, well, it's an open source model. Like, you got to do a lot of the work yourself. Like,
Right.
Whether it's like optimizing it for this specific use case, or figuring out like your inference, stack, all of those components, that's all up to you. It's kind of like getting the community version of MongoDB versus just going to the cloud version.
Yep. Yeah, and that's particularly relevant for like MCP. I mean, I've had that happen where I kind of forget. I'm like, oh yeah, Claude is a very sophisticated agent. So when I go try to use these tools with some other agent that I've built, there's a lot more that I need to do. It's not going to perform like Claude because they have put so much work into that front end on the agent, Tom, I don't know if you'd seen this. You started talking on, like the breadth and the knowledge. And I thought this was a really nice diagram that kind of illustrated Quinn 3 versus GPT-OSS. Of course, this is the 20B, but I think it still applies. And they're basically just explaining that it's a wider base of knowledge, less experts in the mix.
Yeah, I read that.
So it's more general. And that was, I think, their goal was to create a very generalized model.
Yeah, I read that, and it said, so in this case, it's like a $3.2 billion parameter activation, which is actually quite small, right? Relative, like, to a 20B model, like with different architecture, we just activate everything. That's 20 gigabytes. Like, you can do that, right? But they purposefully pushed it quite low, at least on this version. I don't know what it is for the 120B version. Yeah, it's interesting. And then some of the comments were around like what would have been in the training data, maybe optimizing for more technical content and less kind of general knowledge content. What's been so based on all of that, like, you've been using it a lot, different executions. What are your high level takeaways?
They're just the fact that you can starting to get away from all the paying per use API, with Claude Code. Now you're using that on a subscription. And I know we complain about the limits. It's actually far beyond reasonable. And with Ollama Turbo, I can't speak to the quality of the service, or it was just launched. I just started playing with it, but it's also, it's $20. And now you can actually run these very capable models on a fixed fee subscription. So yeah. I think just top level, that's kind of the immediate thing.
What's your back of the envelope actually on that? What would be the back of the envelope calculation on token count, right? Where you're like average session, you might do, I don't know, an average Claude code session, I might do a couple of million tokens, right? Over a stretch of time, depending on you know, whether it's using those agent swarms and stuff, like you'd push up more. In a, you know, a weekly token count break even point, where's the kind of, where's the middle ground, you know, like where would it make sense? Do you have a sense of
to pay for the like top tier?
Well, to pay for Turbo and then just go off like a base cursor subscription, for example, because they also have offloading. Like all of those guys, they have offloading to smaller models if you just put it in auto mode to try and get around this stuff, right? If you're doing autocompletes, they've got like their own little autocomplete mini model. Like they're all trying to figure this out. At the same time, Google is launching, as we covered a couple of weeks back, they're launching like local models in Chrome. Everything's going to go to the device, to your device, right? Like, I don't know, where would the sweet spot be? Like, I'm a 5 million token count user, so just use Grok because like you're just going to get super fast and it's super cheap. Or yeah, I don't know what it would be. What is it for you? Like, what's your, feel like this is tokens anonymous? Like, what's your weekly token count?
Tokens anonymous. You're saying at what point am I like, hey, I'll just pay for these credits because I know it will,
or move over to local? Basically, say, look, I'm just going to go to local, try and do the config and
take on
the overhead. It's basically taking on the overhead. It's kind of like, you know, this movement that DHH and the Basecamp guys are pushing towards, like owning your cloud infrastructure and stuff. Now, like, you know, we're paying AWS millions of dollars a year, and now I'm paying Hotzinger, or whatever it is, the roll your own cloud kind of cloud light provider from Europe. It's like that equation.
Yeah, I envision a hybrid model. You know, like just in cloud in general, everybody, I mean, this is like the last 15 years. Nothing new, but people were, hey, we're going to move 100% to the cloud, and there's all this buzz. But at the end of the day, most organizations are running some type of hybrid infrastructure. And I think the same will apply here. What I've always envisioned is some type of like model router where you might route locally for like sensitive information. If you have some type of like PII or something, or some type of business process where you'd route different requests locally or to a cloud or different providers. Because we've seen people talk about that. I think ChatGPT, we'll find out here shortly, but I think they said they're doing away with all the different model names, right?
Yeah.
Azure has a model called Model Router that's available, and that's exactly what that does. So I've always envisioned that that's probably where we'll go with the local stuff. And that's why I put myself on the request list for the DGX device to basically be able to do that myself.
Yeah. What's the damage on one of those, that DGX thing? Like, how much do they cost?
I think it went up. It was like $4,000 maybe.
Well, you can get your own NVIDIA A100 for 89 grand. Or NVIDIA DGX B200 AI server for 300 grand.
Yeah. When I was looking at this, I was like, man, it was supposed to come out already, but they're going to get out of date already. And this is just for anybody curious, this is what I'm talking about. It's like this little device that fits in your hand. Where's a picture?
DGX Spark, I believe that's.
Yeah, so it looks like a little toy. But that's a supercomputer that 10 years ago it would have been like racks of gear.
That's amazing. I want to get one now as well.
Yeah, they also have a bundle where you can get two and run it like a cluster. DGX
I've
station.
always looked at these and thought, you know, surely the only people that would need these are researchers who are, you know, fine tuning, doing stuff locally. But actually, maybe this is where we'll go.
I think it's a super easy way. And now with GPT-OSS, like if you're a company that has to deal with a bunch of compliance. You've always been able to run the llamas and these different models, but GPT-OSS makes it that much easier and that much more accessible. Like every provider is running it now, and it's actually really, really good. So I could see this making an impact in those types of environments. When companies were maybe uncertain or had some type of limitations, you can now run this in so many different ways.
I wonder if that will be like I'm trying to find what the price is. That's super interesting.
And OpenAI just,
well, you could basically,
they've for $1, they announced selling GPT for $1 to the federal government.
yeah,
I think that's like $1 per user.
Yeah.
So I would imagine that's like a big part of this release is getting into certain spaces that were more difficult and really like locking it down, saying, yeah, we own this space now.
Yeah, well, I can imagine the conversation saying, I want to host models locally on a private cloud, and then the next question would be, well, what model are you going to use? And they say, I'm going to use a Chinese lab model. Would basically freak out any kind of conservative CIO anywhere, even though it's an open weight model and you can control everything for some of them. Yeah, awesome. All right, let's get into the demos.
Well, while I have it open, and I'll just show this OpenCode. So this is the direct, I don't know if you say competitor, but it's a alternative to Claude Code and Gemini CLI and all these other, like every company now has a coding CLI based coding agent. So I can't co-sign this one yet. I don't know too much. I've just kind of started configuring it. But the thing that I like is the flexibility. So I basically set up, I have a ton of different providers here from Anthropic, OpenRouter, Grok, Google.
Yeah, rad.
Who else? So I basically have access to any model out there. And not only that, so say let's look at the 120B version of OSS. Well, now I can run that on Cerebra's OpenRouter locally on my computer. I can run it with Ollama Turbo. Of course, I'm either missing something or this is required, but I had to create a proxy because of the OpenAI compatibility. But once I did that, I just run this proxy in Docker, and then I can use the cloud-based Turbo instance to run these models. So I think that's pretty cool. And then you want to go really Inception. You can also use Grok through Cloudflare Gateway. And that's a whole nother thing. We could do a whole episode on the gateway stuff. I started actually preparing some materials, but not today. But Cloudflare Gateway, and there are others like Azure Foundry. It's amazing because you can serve up models through the same endpoint. And even if it's not Cloudflare that's running inference for ChatGPT, but you can still access all their models through their gateway. And that way you get the same observability, cost control, all these different things that come with like corporate proxies and LLM gateways.
Yeah, so it's sort of like you've got access to the cloud infrastructure and controls and all that stuff as well. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So this is, I have to switch manually, but I have a hybrid setup here, right? So if I want to do something locally, I just need to change the model, and then I can run the same model locally. So let's check. Just check Grok.
Whoa, so fast, isn't it?
And running it through OpenCode, this is the slowest experience. Tom, I actually, on our OAP demo site.
The Open Agent platform.
Yeah, OpenAgent platform, oap.demos.build. I still have some work to do on this, so I don't think everyone can access it yet, but we will. We'll make it available. But let me switch over and show you there. I don't know, Tom, if you have any example prompts, we can run those, but this is insane, insanely fast. Watch this. And in here, one of the key core elements of the LangChain, LangGraph environments frameworks is all the flexibility. So you can see I have like every provider set up here. And then I have this tools agent where I just configured all of them. So if I go over into these settings, then Merry Christmas. You have like everything that you need pretty much. And there might be some missing, like I really just added the core, like top tier models. But
Yeah. This is such an underrated tool that the guys released, OpenAgent platform.
yes, and we're
Like,
talking about the Claude Code subagents and the templates and how they're just markdown files. Well, at least in my mind, they're portable because if you go to create an agent in OpenAgent platform, look, I'll select Grok agent as the template. All it is a name, description, and then the system prompt, and some configurable parameters here. But that's exactly the same format as the Claude Code subagents.
yeah, except it's accessible to non-technical users.
Exactly. So this you can set up a pretty sophisticated agent framework without writing a single line of code on this OpenAgent platform. And I think that was their goal.
Yeah, I'd love to see them push it a bit harder and sort of make it a bit more almost enterprisey, so you could say, hey, this is how you can deploy an agent garden effectively across your organization without having to lock into, say, the Microsoft stack or the Google stack or whatever. Yeah, it's really cool. But anyway, well, now that we're on LangChain, are you ready to pivot into the SWE, open SWE?
Yeah,
Open software
yeah.
engineering?
I
And
was going to
also,
show you just real quick. I don't know. I'll just pick a random one, but I just took a example from the LangChain SWE software engineer, open software engineer documentation. And even though that's not exactly what we're talking about right now, I'm just
design a
going to
generic
paste this
cache
example so you
interface.
can see how fast this goes. It's
So the prompt
crazy.
is design a generic cache interface with get, set, and invalidate methods, then provide two adapters in memory, blah, 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 Redis adapter, mock a Redis. Yeah, okay. Well,
Well, I don't know. That was weird because it hung. It didn't really stream. Usually, I don't know if it had to wake up or
maybe it was streaming in the background. Yeah, that was wild.
yeah. Let me just try it again to see if it'll go right away. Cloudflare maybe. So this instance is running. This is not Grok through Cloudflare Gateway. This is the actual Cloudflare hosted version. Hmm. Let's do it on Grok real fast so we have a good. Yeah, Tom, I feel like I want to switch this over to. Whoops. So it's not on. I don't know if it's Vercel or what, but it's really slow.
You're such a Vercel hater, mate. I'm in your hands. You're the deployment engineer in this operation.
I'm not a hater.
You're a lover, not a hater. I get it.
It's just when it doesn't load immediately. I'm like, what? I probably need to spend more time understanding how they cache, things like that. Grok, where do you?
Well, just so I understand it, so this OpenAgent the Open Agent platform is the hosted package, the hosted basically site. Here we go. Yeah. The hosted agent site. And then the agents can be deployed on LangChain, like Agent Cloud, right? But are these
Right.
agents in here? Are they deployed there, or is that not how it's configured?
Yeah, so this entire platform consists of, I think, 3 components. So you essentially have your
Which are
your
separate repositories, yeah.
yeah. So we're hosting the agent logic in LangGraph platform. So as you can see under deployments, it's just a GitHub repository, and then you go to new deployment, and you configure your environment variables and what you want to name it. See how I can just select any of my GitHub projects. The key is making sure that this langgraph.json path is your actual path. So if you have this in a subfolder, and if you have like examples, agents, and then your langgraph JSON there, you want to make sure that this is pointing to the actual path of the JSON file. But yeah, it's super easy to set up. I mean, I love this. But anyways, yeah, so all these agents that I showed, these are running basically as containers in LangGraph platform. And then this web interface, it's just a Next.js web interface. They also have for your RAG, this is a separate component that you have to set up. And in my version, yeah, this is actually running a Docker container in Microsoft Azure. It was just like the easiest and quickest thing at the time. So yeah, this is really multi-cloud using all the providers. And then the same thing for the MCP. If you go to set this up, just either, if you're not worried about tools, just skip this MCP part or just use the arcade demo server. Yeah, so this is a whole separate thing. This is essentially like a MCP server. Yeah. Or MCP aggregator gateway.
All right. So I'm moving you along because I really want to see this OpenSWE product from LangChain. I've been excited to see this for a while. So basically they have launched an open source, an open version of Codex and Claude, this kind of like cloud hosted multi-threaded kind of battle. It's more like Codex and Devon as opposed to Claude Code, right? It's like cloud hosted. You can have multiple versions running constantly, and it's all powered by LangChain stack. And the reason why I think it's amazing is because of what you just demoed on the open source front in terms of cost for these open source models. Not just OpenAI's one, but all of the ones that we've covered in the previous shows, right? And you could plug them into an environment like this. Like, yeah, take me through it. What is it? Show it to me. This looks
well, Tom, that's where I guess you can self-host this. And I'd started setting it up, I don't know, a month ago, or when I first saw it in their repository, and I couldn't get it running in the cloud. And then just yesterday, I saw them post about this hosted version. So if you just go to SWE.langchain.com, then all you have to do is authenticate it with your GitHub account. And then it has direct, just like any coding apps, you authenticate it, it launches your GitHub splash screen, and then it has access to my GitHub account. So yeah, first looking at this, if you've used Codex, it looks very familiar. And I would say it's, so far, it seems most closely modeled after Codex.
Yeah, so they talk about it as an open source asynchronous coding agent, which basically just means you can fire off a bunch of stuff. It can see the open, I guess, tickets or issues on any repository you have, and then you can assign those to multiple instances of this. And then it has effectively in its architecture, and we'll share the blog post in the show notes, but in its architecture, effectively it has the GitHub issue and the repo as its inputs. And then it has a manager kind of router component in the graph, a planner agent, and then the programmer sub-agent effectively. And within that, each component of the planner and the programmer have like a React loop and tool calling. And then once the programmer is finished, it can then open a pull request for you to review.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the video that the guys shared a couple of days ago, it was cool because he basically just said like OpenSWE, the OpenSWE developer is one of the most significant contributors to the OpenSWE project.
Really?
Yeah. It was like, 70% of something, or so it was a significant amount had been contributed to the package, this thing you're looking at on the screen right now, from itself, which is quite very Inception-esque.
That's awesome. I will say I was pretty impressed just with like the usability and the UI layout. I think it's much better than Codex from that standpoint. However, you can see these example projects I tried, all of them have errors. So I haven't, and I just set this up for the first time last night. So maybe I need to start with something more simple. I don't know, but some of these also ran for quite a while, and then like one of these ran, it was like $20, and then it didn't finish.
Yeah, okay.
But I think that's probably something on my side. So, that's the other thing is, at least at the moment with the hosted version, you are, I mean, I don't know, limited, I guess. You have 3 options, which is still pretty good. I'm interested in deploying the self-hosted version and trying to integrate, like the Ollama and some of these other providers to have that same flexibility I just showed you on the OpenCode.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get it running. Maybe we can put it into the vault. That'd be sick. I'll try it as well, maybe between now and then. If you go to the config, like how much control do you have over this thing?
It's basically just setting up your authentication. You have actually a lot more control on the models configuration. So on this side, you have quite a bit. You can set, like your max context and your limits there. But what's really cool is you can configure the specialized models, like different models for your planner, different models you have a programmer model, a reviewer model, a router model.
I'll just chuck this in the chat if you like. And you can pull up the model, the actual agent architecture if you want, because that would give a bit more context.
Yeah, that would be good because it shows the planner.
Just go to the search, it'll be faster, and just put in OpenSWE LangChain, and you'll get right to it. We'll put it in the show notes as well. Yeah, that top one.
Yeah, there you go. There's that.
Yeah, that one. If you just double click on it, yeah.
Sorry, I think it's down here. Yeah.
Yeah. Here we go. There we go. Like so you can customize the model for that planning loop component before it generates the plan, and then you can customize the model and the temperature basically for the programmer loop. And the programmer loop is interesting because it's got like the sub graph, right? It's got the primary React loop and then a reviewer sub agent by the looks of it.
And I would imagine when you spin this up in LangGraph Cloud,
yeah.
Remember we showed the different assistants, so you can create different assistants with different configurations. I would imagine that's how this is set up.
Yeah. If you go back to the actual app, what else can you like dive into it? In the config there. And those, router model name. Okay, right. And the router temperature, summarizer, maximum token output, and then the MCP service. Okay, cool. So you've got enough control. What does it mean? What does that top one mean, actually? So you can have a max number of context actions and a max number of review actions. An action consists of a tool call and a maximum number of those actions that are allowed within the context of a generation phase, right? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. Have you used like the deep researcher on LangChain OAP? And then sometimes you'll get a message that says you've hit 25
Yeah.
iterations.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like, I mean, there are different reasons for it, but it's kind of like rate limiting. If something gets stuck in a loop, you don't want it to run forever.
Hmm. Yeah, like Claude gets stuck like installing and reinstalling the same Tailwind package a
Right.
100 times. And I'm like, well, that was an expensive process.
Yep. This is just a template, their UI app that I had loaded up. So I'm just going to run a simple check for bugs so you can see what this actually looks like while it's running. But it's also it's really cool that you can switch between when this gets going. You'll see the planner view and the programmer view, and then the detail. It's like it's laid out really nicely where it's still very clean, but you can expand and still see all the details here. Oh, also
That
they've
is
integrated
great. That is
Daytona,
great. Yeah.
which we've talked about quite a bit. So all of the actions execute in a Daytona sandbox container.
Right. So the virtual secure code environment.
Yep. Yep. So
What I
here
love
you
about
see
it.
it's the planner making the plan. And then it'll kick it over to the programmer and you can switch back and forth. And then from there, it works pretty similarly to Codex, where it will do like pull requests, and then gives you a shortcut to GitHub, and then you execute those. One thing that's really, really cool is this. If you click on this model button,
Yeah.
well, right now it doesn't show much. When it actually starts executing and using the different agents or the different models assigned, it'll give us a breakdown of each model, what percentage of the token usage, what the cost is. And that's really, really cool feature. A lot of things have that, but just the way that they've laid it out, so nice.
Yeah, that is really good. Actually, this is a really good point. So yeah, being able to monitor this token usage by session, understand where everything's going. I love it when, particularly the LangChain guys, when they build a version of something in the market, an AI app in the market, like what they did with the most recent release of the Deep Researcher, is you basically get to see what's under the hood of how these apps are actually built because they reverse engineer everything, but they give you a like under the hood view. This is great. The other thing is like, you look at the model use there. If you highlight that again, like the usage amounts, I read this article recently, and this is a great example of when you're thinking about costs and model costs. Often we kind of focus on the high level number of like the output tokens, but actually when you look at usage, it's often more focused on the input tokens, right? You can see your input token count there is like 300,000 already, but the output component is only 30,000. So actually your cost focus is more critical on the input side, particularly with this kind of use case, which is pretty interesting.
One of these was I think it hit like 30 million. It was
Input. Whoa.
That's what it said, but it wasn't very expensive because it was all input.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what's up with these or why they aired. You also lose if you're running their hosted version. You don't see the traces in Langsmith, so that's another reason I'm looking forward to deploying our own, so we can show on the back end what's going on. I don't have that visibility here.
So is that still running on that running version? Is that
It
still?
is. That's why I was trying to show that
Cool.
on a different one, so you could.
Yeah, so the output, yeah, just so go back to that. So that's actually what it looks like at the end of the output, and it lists the tasks. The UI in this is beautiful. This is great.
Sorry.
And then
Yeah, so you can drill down.
And then it summarized every task that it's done. Can you open a summary? So like anything really? Yeah. Okay, cool. And then you can those components. Yeah, nice.
And when you start diving into really any of the LangChain, LangGraph platforms that they've designed, whatever they're calling it, they're not like products. I don't know. You'll see a lot of this comes down to prompt engineering. It's so important, and you can tell that they highly emphasize that while they're building these things.
That's an interesting point, actually. I guess they do have because they have a prompt manager, right, in the back end. So every time they do one of these, it's kind of like a use case kind of exposition of their stack, right? Because you can have prompt management, prompt versioning, all of that sort of stuff within the LangGraph, or sorry, their LangChain kind of environments, the hosted ones and stuff. So
I actually made sorry, side tangent. I made an MCP server for LangChain prompts. I don't remember if it's publicly available, but maybe I'll bug check that again and then show it and make it available. But it's actually really useful.
Do you dream in MCP?
Yeah. That's all I think about. It's just
Android sheep and MCPs.
like the MCP logo, connectors. You know, maybe I'm just like that much of a nerd, but there are times where my brain is just like I visualize like diagrams and stuff, and I'm like, stop, get out of my head.
You're such a nerd. All right, that was awesome, man.
Yeah, well, not quite because it didn't actually
Didn't kick over. That's okay.
Yeah,
I get the idea.
You get the idea.
I really want to play with this now. So yeah, that's really cool. Really cool.
Yeah. Well, Tom, or we can go wherever you'd like next, but demo wise, you have something pretty cool on the V0 thing.
Yeah, I might do that one pretty quickly. We've got it on the build demos thing, right? So it's V0.
No, it's v0.build.
v0.demos.build.
Yeah, I know. I kind of like having a separate domain just for like the random side projects and stuff, but I don't know. Maybe we'll change it.
I love it. I think it's great. All right, here we go. Let me pull this up for you. So Vercel. So a while back, we covered the V0 API. So these guys released V0, the vibe coding toolkit, which if you're not familiar with, I recommend everyone go and play with. Yeah, .dev, v0.dev. ChatGPT-5 in V0.
Yeah, I think they just dropped it.
Available in 46 minutes. Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. Yeah, these guys have tied up. They've been building on top of ChatGPT and this specific coding toolkit since ChatGPT 3.5. So that's awesome. All right, so this is V0, right? And build a bunch of stuff, prompt your way to success, all that jazz. Then they released this as a model, as an API, where you've got like a couple of different versions, medium and large, effectively. There is a small version, I think, as well, but that must just be in the product. Then they basically launched this template. And you can see the GitHub repo here, where you can then embed this API product using their updated, I think it's got their updated Vercel AI SDK powering it too, into your own products, which is sick. So this is just a demo app, but you can then effectively recreate versions of what they had built out into, anything. You can embed like generative UI into chat interfaces. You can embed it into anything. You can create custom versions. You could customize this to an internal use case. So for example, you could say, all right, well, constrain the output to my specific kind of infrastructure stack, and then allow internal users to create UIs on top of your own data, for example. Like you can do so much with this in the context of, say, enterprise tooling. That'd be so cool.
So it's essentially, is it just a web interface, like Next.js web interface, but it uses their API?
Yeah.
Is there more to it as far as the design and architecture of the template?
This is very simple. Like when you actually look at like the actual app, it's just a very simple React app. And basically it's very similar to what the LangChain guys are doing. Basically they're launching this to say, hey, we've got an API product. It's almost like a distribution mechanism to basically so that you can see this and say, hey, I could build this internally for my own audience and customize it if I wanted to. The fact that it's really good and they have these custom fine-tuned models, I believe they're fine-tuned. I don't know that for certain, but I believe they are on top of ChatGPT specifically for front-end work and front-end generation. So if you were to customize this on top of your own infrastructure, it's basically enterprise generative UI kind of software as a software, just-in-time software kind of like opportunity. That's what I think. That's why I thought I wanted to highlight it. And it's just really cool because then you can just build your own versions of Lovable. Like, create me a landing page.
Does it integrate with
live
GitHub?
fishing. This version that they released, no, it doesn't. So in V0, the actual version of V0, they have like a lot more features. Yeah, so I've got a couple of, here's a fly fishing landing page or a couple of different things that I've been building, or like say this VO from a couple of, this is the VO app from a couple of episodes ago. Here's the code. And then you can connect into, you can fork, you can then connect into the main repo or branches and push and pull changes, which is really cool. I've seen a lot of workflows now where people basically they will expose this tool to non-technical people and then have basically they can create branches and then push like updates live to the product, right? Which is amazing. Like exposing the ability to push to production to non-technical people, like going further up the product kind of team stack is enabled by those things. And then they have these integrations, environment, variable management, all that stuff is not in this Vercel kind of public version. But, here's my fly fishing landing page. Book my adventure, learn more. Like, yeah, it's rad. It's just really cool. So yeah, go and play with it, build something. Like, it's really fun.
I love the concept of, and I didn't think about basically deploying it in like a private environment and pre-configuring it so that it has access to like certain sources and you could limit permissions and stuff like that. That opens up a lot of potentials.
Yeah, they also have, I've been customizing this for work actually because I'm getting this up and running for marketing people to basically be able to generate landing pages quickly. They have this V0 design registry. They have a process where you can build your own config and embed your design system within a reference repo. And then you can switch out design systems as well to constrain the design output so you're not always going through those processes. And then there's this ShadCN because they use the ShadCN UI all the time, and you can basically just fork this registry, customize it, and then integrate it with your version to say, all right, well, always, and then you can just sync. Maybe you could sync that to your Figma design system, which would be pretty cool. And then it would literally be what you need every time.
Yeah, that's so cool. You mentioned trying to introduce it to non-technical people. How's that going?
What I think it's like there's a lot of potential, but it needs to actually accelerate the workflow. And using things like this will do that. If I just hand them over, hey, here's this tool, go and try V0, it's just going to fail. They're not technical enough. And also it's just too time consuming. Right. Because like, all right, now say this example, say we were running our own fly fishing company, you and I can, given that we know nothing about fly fishing, this would be very unusable and also like kind of just more time than it's worth. And I probably could have spun up something using my pre-built landing page components in HubSpot or whatever. If it's going to replace a bunch of those tools, it has to be as easy and seamless as that. So I have to do the work in the back end as say like a AI go-to-market enabler to get it to that level so that they can run with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've already mentioned this, but I have like a full-on case study going here with my significant other. She was a medical professional, started trying to do her own things. And just last night, Tom, I asked, the reason I asked you that is because I was thinking about, I went to look at something she was working on. I showed her how to connect GitHub, and she had forked this project 35 times
Right.
as like, just the stuff where like I kind of browsed over it and I was like, yeah, it's pretty straightforward. You just connect your GitHub. And I didn't even think about like just the basic concepts like that. So we had a good laugh.
Yeah, and a lot of that, like that's very embedded. It's almost like learned behavior, right, for developers, and it's a different way of working. Like it's all of those
Absolutely.
components. I think developers don't appreciate just how different their practice is to other professionals. Yeah. All right. So that's that. Do you want me to spin into artificial societies? What else you got? What else is in the docket?
Yeah, let's hear about it. I had some other stuff, but I think either do it on the side or later because there's just so much today. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and in this I can touch because I touch on Claude 4.1. So Claude 4.1 came out as well, which we haven't talked about, which is a GPT 5-week release. It's obviously like they wanted to release something on the week that ChatGPT was releasing everything, and it was an incremental update to Claude models. But they did say when they released it that they said that they're going to release significant upgrades to Claude in the coming weeks as well. So apparently more is coming down the pipe. That also happened. Yeah, I'll skip over the world models, the Google world models. If you want to go check that out, it's pretty rad. Just Google it. Like, it's not available yet, so we can't play with it. So it's sort of not much point, but it looks incredible. It's basically like this model that creates interactive kind of 3D world exploration worlds.
And that's the Genie
Genie
3.
model, yeah.
Genie 3. Yeah.
Actually, on the other thing I just want to note is there is a leaked thing that I saw about AI mode advertising that Google is introducing. And that is significant, primarily because that's a relatively new thing and everyone thought that they weren't going to go so early on that. Apparently it's coming in as an experiment in the US market. But their like search advertising business is like, hundreds of billions of dollars a year, right? I'll get the exact figure, but it's like not something that mere humans can really appreciate in scale. Like, yeah, total search ad revenue in 2024 was $103 billion, right? And so can you imagine how hard it would be to disrupt yourself when you're staring at $100 billion line item, but they're willing to do it and double down into this AI mode? I don't know if you've used AI mode, but basically it's like creating really rich, really high value, interactive advertising space. And the fact that they've sorted it out and the fact that they're going to launch it will change a lot about how companies grow, how businesses try and get attention. Like it's going to change a lot in the digital, like basically how companies grow. So it's, yeah, I think it's significant.
So how's it different than, we've talked about like the changes in robots, TXT, and LLMs, TXT. And then after the Vercel conference, we were talking about AEO, like what was it? Agent engine optimization, right?
Yeah.
OpenAI, I got an email about something I signed up for along the same lines of like, make sure your robot magnets are working, basically. So
Yeah.
what's different in the Google version?
Well, what you're describing, there's two versions. So we talked about Profound. These guys, they're a startup, but there's heaps of others. And you can also roll your own version of this, which is basically like what's my mentions, which is kind of like SEO, but for chat, but for AI chats, right? Try and figure out like when people are asking for things in my area, how often do I appear in the chat kind of recommendations, and then you can build a bunch of different questions, stuff like that. That's like the organic kind of chat performance. Whereas this is search ads in like the equivalent of search ads, but in AI mode in Google, in the AI chat interface. And apparently it's going to be structured. This is based on the leaked components that I saw. It's going to be structured based on keywords still. So you still target keywords, you still target phrases, same kind of structure, but it will then contextually recommend similar to how Google search ads do in the context of those search queries, where if someone goes on a journey to learn about something, I'm going to use the example again, like fly fishing. What's the best fly fishing spots near me? What should I buy for a fly fishing trip? And then in that context, say Google shopping ads will be served on a pay-per-click basis. So in the same way that like regular search ads do. It's pretty significant. Yeah. But anyway, that's not really dev related, but it's definitely coming at us. And there are a lot of people who are going to have to change how they work when that thing gets dropped. All right. I want to talk to you about societies.io. Let me pull it up and then I'll start. So I found this company on X and it caught my attention for a couple of different reasons. One of the reasons is it's a very bold idea. And also it sort of links back to a couple of things that we saw emerge during the early days of LLMs where there was research, but no one had ever built like a product around it. So what is it? Basically, this is a product that it lets you create virtual AI personas and you can run content specific experiments. So it's for content people and marketing people like me, specific experiments against those virtual audiences. The benefit of that is basically this is like the next stage of the world of, say, digital experimentation. We're always taught to like do A/B tests and like test everything that you can to make sure that what you're putting out into the world is as efficient and effective as possible. Validate because you can, right? This takes it to the next level, which is like, I'm going to validate with a virtual community of people that's structured in a way that matches my audience to validate ahead of time and optimize before a message even hits anyone, which is interesting because then you can take it to the next step and think you can virtually test anything, which generates some pretty interesting social questions. It's like, well, how much, there's a lot of manipulation in that. Like, what about politics? Or like, there's a lot of stuff where like it takes a lot of the risk out of anything when you can virtually validate things. Now, all of that being said, it's pretty exciting and interesting. So what I want to do is I want to take you through an example and I'll show you how it works. And then I want to show you, basically, I tried to use Claude 4.1 to try and recreate a version of this to see how hard it would be. Cool. Let's jump in. So here is the app. All right, so this is an example. These guys had a couple of iterations on their product, they said, but this is kind of like the one that they landed on. And interestingly, they actually used the product to try and validate whether the startup idea was good. And so their examples are always related to like startup investors, saying, would startup investors invest in a company that does this? Which I think is pretty funny. It's very meta.
So do they provide the data sets for stuff like that? Like, what's the core of their technology? Is it a combination of the data sets and their algorithms or code, or are they?
Yeah, so I'll start with what it is. It is basically an LLM-powered virtual database of potential personas of people, right? So it's built, they don't have any proprietary models. It's built on top of Claude. I think probably ChatGPT-5, they'll build it on top of that, right? So it's actually not, it's the kind of software app that's only possible now that we have access to foundation models, but it's not a fundamental innovation on the kind of the model layer, for example. And it's in the category of, basically it's in the category of, I think it's like agent simulation platforms, or like a simulation platform. And there's quite a few of these. This is just one that I found, right? Then the way that it actually functions is they have this persona creation kind of process. You can then connect your personal social accounts, or you can just create completely virtual ones. You just click it and basically you just go, yeah, it's just a prompt. You just add in a prompt and say, look, this is the kind of person that I'm looking to communicate with, Or what I did was actually I put one of our videos, YouTube videos in, and I said, this is a video that I've created. Can you create an audience based on what I talked about? And then it will generate a bunch of those personas in the background, which is effectively, we can't peer under the hood, but I'm assuming that is just a bunch of prompt engineering, right? And then they represent that as a virtualized kind of node network of different people. So this is the AI enthusiast group that's related to our podcast. And then it gives you a sense of like, all right, this is an associate machine learning scientist, virtual machine learning scientist. This is a senior AI engineer. And then they also try to use data from how ideas spread to virtually represent kind of nodes in a social graph. So when certain messages hit people, how likely are they to share it? How likely are they to talk about it? And how does that affect your distribution of different messages within a virtualized network and a virtualized group? And then they also have a couple of different countries that they're virtualizing as well. So these kinds of people in India, Canada, etc. You with me so far?
Yeah, this is crazy. I don't know. I don't consider myself a doomer, but like that's where the first things that come to mind are all the bad things that could happen. So maybe I am. I don't know, but
well, we'll check in on Skynet a little bit later. But like this, basically, what you can then do is, before I mention this around like the actual core, which is basically this simulation engine. So you've got this, and then there's a simulation engine where you push messages into this network. They do have some example like results on the website, and then they claim that they outperform foundation models just based on this kind of graph architecture and then this simulation engine that they have. But interestingly, and that their methodology you can check, but basically they had a bunch of like testing against a human, and then testing against basically their algorithm and then the basic LLMs to say, if I shared this post with this kind of person, how would it perform in terms of like its shareability, its audience reach, those sorts of things. And then their engine outperformed both humans and the core foundation models in prediction across a blind test of a bunch of LinkedIn posts, and then how those posts actually performed. So that's how they're trying to build their kind of story. It's not completely validated, like this is very new, but that's how they kind of think about it. When you actually start,
can you do the evaluations on your side? Like if you do a simulation, you say, this is the campaign that I want to go with or whatever, and then measure how that actually went, and then do like iterative evaluations or something like that. Can you do that on your side?
That's interesting. I was just going to start validating it. So once I did this, I was going to share it, create the thing, and then we can do like a post analysis. I don't know if then when you start sharing it, this ingests that information and gets smarter about your actual performance, which is interesting because the next thing I'll show you, this is a virtual society, right? The AI enthusiasts, these are virtual people. Whereas when I go into the other area where I've actually connected my LinkedIn, you see real people, like, and it tries to give you an estimate of like how they will actually respond to your content.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go through the process. Like you can say, all right, I want to create a new test. And then you've got this, like these examples here. They're mostly social posts or like just content creation, that sort of stuff, email subject lines or emails. I did an example of this, or I might just I'll do a fresh one so we can see what it's like. Article, GPT-5.
AI is a fad.
Not enough flops for my liking.
You know what's, sorry, a side tangent here on the build thing that we built where it pulls our transcripts and summarizes. It's funny, like I say more sarcastic things than I thought, because reading through that, sometimes it'll reinterpret like some smartass thing I said, and then I'm like, well, now it looks like I have an opinion that I actually don't. I was just joking. Yeah.
All right, here we go. So they've got this chat interface where you can like get it to optimize and get it to basically craft an example for you, which is helpful for this. here's an article, and then you can launch the simulation, and it basically says, all right, we're distributing your message. Let's see what it's like. While it's doing that, I'll just show you the open source examples that I was doing. So I put in this one, which is an article about unleashing the GPT open source model, blah, 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 very, very specific to our audience, something that, we probably would write. That's the original. And then you can see up here, they give you this score, which is like, all right, that had a very high attention score into this audience as a simulation. And then it tries to give you an assessment of like what's partial attention, all of those sorts of things. And then it gives you insights as well. And you can ask follow-ups, which is kind of interesting. And then they try and give you conversation responses based on a simulation of how those kinds of personas would respond. So like this kind of conversation simulation. And what I really want to see is like how they actually kind of drive this in and what the prompts are. Then it tries to give you advice to say, right, well, what did they actually like about it? How could you create better versions of this based on a simulation of people's responses? So 60% of the thoughts indicate a strong desire for code snippets and architectural diagrams. If you don't have that, then obviously put those in, and then you would do that and then reiterate, and then potentially you could retest again. What I thought was really cool is you can then iterate on it. So if I go back to our article here, so obviously that would be a pretty provocative thing to do, and it's obviously probably not going to be true, but you can then iterate on this. You can ask for follow-ups. You can also see, all right, well, show me how it performed across individual markets. So you can just basically ask the AI and give you breakdowns. For example, in my test, I was saying, all right, well, show me how the performance of this content varies by role type. How does it change between AI engineers versus senior machine learning engineers and that sort of stuff? So you can actually benchmark your sub personas within this total audience and by country. And then even they've got this really cool thing where you click on one node, you can see, all right, well, this senior machine learning engineer read it in part as an estimate based on the performance. And then you can actually chat with a virtual version of that engineer. And I was like, why didn't you read the whole article? So you can run like little content tests against each node in the network. All right, and the response is, honestly, I usually just skim the first bit to see if it's got real substance or if it's just more than hype. I'm always looking for those true flops, the actual impact, not just bigger than a chatbot. All right, cool. So you could use that potentially to optimize, say, your opener and that sort of stuff. So that's the virtual society, and you can create multiple ones. And then you can connect your personal LinkedIn and Twitter, X. And in this case, this is my LinkedIn graph, right? And I can see people that I'm connected to and my interaction patterns with them. So I'll use this as an example. So Marlene she's one of the LangChain ambassadors. She works for Microsoft as a developer advocate. And then I can start a conversation with her as a virtual version of her that's been represented through this graph. So what I did was I had this this is an article that a video that we put out, right, which is this VO JSON, kind of using JSON kind of structures with VO, the video generation model. And it created, so this is the original here, and I can see the number of reactions, and then it created different variants for me, and it benchmarked those reactions, that variant here. And then I can see, so if I go back to Marlene, I can see that she read it in part, and then I can ask her a follow-up, say, why or what didn't you like about this? And it virtualizes her responses. Now, I'm really interested to know how they do that. Do they go and look at her content to try and estimate, based on what she interacts with and what she likes?
I would imagine they're just a bunch of personas, right? I don't know how much you know about the Cambridge Analytica thing, and not to be negative or anything. I guess they did or didn't do that, depending on who you ask, I think, years and years ago, but that's pretty much the same thing, right? These are just personas. So it might not be exactly a
Oh
replica
yeah.
of Tom, but it's like it knows enough about you from these little bits and pieces to understand generally what your persona is, right?
Well, you're 100% right. So Meta, Google, LinkedIn probably as well, definitely, Google via YouTube. They build these personas up and an understanding of what you are, and then advertisers target you, right? But usually that's behind the scenes. So all of these tools, they give you predictive elements around ads you're putting into those platforms. But I've never been able to use this as someone who just wants to put a blog post out, right? Like I kind of like it because it's kind of fighting against what you're saying. Like I was always at the point of like, all right, if I want to get that benefit, I have to pay the fee. This is like a version of that I can use where I can distribute emails. No one's taxing
Yeah.
me. There's no email tax on SMTP. I can put something out of a HTTP in a blog post. There's no tax on that, right? I own those channels, but I can use this mechanism. So that's why I think it's significant.
Oh
And
yeah,
I
totally.
reckon you could, like, if they had a bit of data and they could scrub information around like what she likes, what she's into, what she looks at, what she reacts to, they could potentially build a virtualized version of these nodes in your own network. So these are different contacts of mine from Australia.
From that perspective, I absolutely
in the
love
US.
this idea because I've said for like 10 years, hey, if Google provided me all the information that they have on me and allowed, I could load it into different business analytics tools and use it like this, then maybe I'm more willing to share my information. But to this point, it's like all these big providers, they have these capabilities, absolutely. And they have for a long time. But I think if we're sharing, like, let us use it too. That's what I've always said. So this is a step in that direction. I think that's great.
Well, and that's what the open source social media kind of stack movement was all about, right? So Mastodon, I think, is what it's called, and I think Blue Sky is built on that. The whole idea is that it should be portable, like it should be forkable, like you should be able to access it.
You know what they're using on the back end? Like, is this Neo4j or a different?
I don't exactly know because they haven't shared that information, but I started looking around. So what I did after this was I was like, all right, how would you build something like this? And there are a couple of platforms out there specifically for this that are part of the Python research kind of community, primarily these core Python packages. And then you would need to plug in something to do this kind of like graph structure, right? Which is the perfect application for Neo4j. So I would be amazed if they weren't using Neo.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like it.
Yeah. Well, then there's visualizations of those concepts as well. So I don't know if it's exactly the same. A couple of the key, so I went through a couple of the old key research papers that came out. The biggest one back in the day was this one, which is, do you remember this? It caused a bit of a stir when it came out. Do you remember this one? This interactive simulacra of human behavior. Basically, it's kind of older, 2023. And it was the first one that I saw anyway of sort of like, what are these virtual environments? And they would basically, it was all just sort of like toys. They were kind of like just building games. And the version of it that I think I saw from the A16Z guys was this, which is like this virtual kind of town thing. And then there's a bunch of these just little agents wandering around and you can get them to interact with each other. A lot of them, the examples were like games. So I kind of ignored it because I'm like, I'm not really into gaming. Like, that's really cool. Like, NPCs and stuff that can talk properly and have real, personas. But I never really kind of made the leap to a really solid kind of business application like these guys obviously did. So there's a couple of those. I'll put the rest of them in the show notes.
Do you know enough about the Genie 3? Like, are these pretty closely related? Because from what I understand, Genie 3 is like virtual, like metaverse, I guess, like virtual environments. Then do you see running simulations in these virtual environments within that, like containerized metaverse space? Or I'm just butchering the lingo, but I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do, sort of.
Or like,
No,
are
so
they related in your mind?
the things I'm going to show you are actually way simpler than that. So the number one application of this simulation environment, there's a really great talk from, I think he's like the head of AI at NVIDIA, talks about this a lot. I'll put it in the show notes. It was at the Sequoia AI Day recently, and he basically talked about how, like, if you want to get like a learning environment and a data input kind of vector for robots and robotic learning from the human form, it's really, really hard to get enough data. Like, you have to basically strap a VI headset to someone and then hook it up to a robot's fingers, and then basically just pick up shit and wander around and like look at things and like, turn off a light, whatever it is. And so he basically said, look, we just can't scale that. So we have to put all these things into a virtualized environment. But the virtualized environments he's describing are like 10,000 hands twiddling a pen or whatever, robot hands, and basically building these robotic and kind of learning environments in a virtualized world. The next step for something like that Genie model is that, where you put these virtualized kind of reflective, like physics, real world physics compatible kind of agent or elements into an environment like that to learn. And apparently that's what's been happening in automated driving algorithms for a very long time. They'll put them in, like, there's some like hilarious headlines where they put them into like Grand Theft Auto games and stuff just to get them to learn how to drive. But this is way simpler than that. And I think it's accessible for a lot of developers, which is why I think it's cool, which is like, actually, so this is an example of like a research package that can be used to build these things called agents.jl. There's another one called Mesa, which is another one. And basically it's these packages give you a structure to virtualize kind of an agent interaction environment around some sort of concept, whether it's like an economics concept or like social interactions or birds flocking, whatever it is, in a very simplified way. It's not like 3D environments, totally chaotic, like a robotics thing. It's like, well, here are my dimensions. This is a more constrained environment, kind of like a social media distribution graph. It's a more constrained concept, right? These packages and these things are open source packages you can use. So, for example, in the Mensa version, I might show you on the agents.jl version. They have a bunch of these cool little examples you can spin through. Yeah, the flocking model in here. You can see it's kind of like this, like basically trying to emulate what's a seemingly random environment that's very complicated to the visual eye, to try and understand how birds might flock together. You can see the time. And then, but the actual way that it's kind of defined is just Python functions in here. Bird speed, all of these things. And this is how you would do it, because you could build using LLMs in an agentic app like LangChain. You could then virtualize or model the way people may share content, may discuss things, may discuss ideas, all of those sorts of things, to try and model like a distribution graph through a social network using very simple kind of functions. So I think this is sort of, I don't exactly know, but I think this is how it's built. The question underneath that is like, how do they model, like I was saying before, like how do they model an actual person and how they think an actual person will behave, as opposed to a persona? Because a persona is like, all right, someone who is like Tom and Cameron is more likely to do this when you share the article. But if I share an article, because I think this is where it's going based on this little graph that I showed you here in artificial societies. If I share an article and I want Tamaz Tungus to share it, he's one of my connections, but he's like super influential, then that's really valuable to me. If I'm like a startup founder trying to get a bit of traction, right? If he reads it and then he shares it, like that's like so much more valuable than anyone in my network, right?
Mm-hmm.
Building an algorithm to try and understand that is very valuable, but I don't know if they are doing that, if they have done it, if anyone's doing that, right? That's super interesting and, again, a bit doomerish. The other factor is social networks like LinkedIn, right? They're a social graph, same with Facebook, but they're not a interest graph. So you can actually share, like if you go to basically a target society, right? And AI enthusiasts, we could run a test on something like TikTok. And TikTok is just an interest graph. All it is the algorithm is just based on what you watch, and a reinforcement kind of feedback loop around where you spend your time. So on that basis,
It's a recommendation engine, basically.
it's not necessarily a recommendation. Well, it is a recommendation engine in terms of what comes up in your feed next, but apparently the secret sauce is more about like dwell time, interest. It has nothing to do with who you're connected to. It has nothing to do with anything other than just seconds on a video, pretty much. And then the process of learning about that and then seeding these things into you. And again, that's an algorithm that's completely opaque. Like no one knows how that works. But things like this could be used to decompose that and try and break it apart and try and understand it more effectively. Yeah, I recommend playing with it, seeing what it's like. I'm trying to see, can I replicate this here?
Yeah, I think the overarching theme of trying to create meaning or understanding of like physical spaces and things that are, I guess, more abstract, not text, not audio. I think there's a big wave coming. And again, I don't know if it's related. I sent you a link in the chat, and it's a data set on Hugging Face called Interior GS. You might have already heard of that. It actually looks very applicable to what you do, Tom, potentially. But I've started seeing some of these projects pop up as like top of the list. So it seems related to me.
It's not this interior design one, is it?
No, interior spatial verse. Spatial verse all one. Yeah, yes. Interior GS. GS. Yeah.
Well, that is really cool. I haven't seen that before, no.
When I browsed through this, I was like, kind of feels like a repeat of Tom explaining some of the problems he's trying to solve.
Yeah, these gauzy, like this depth, like the combos of these is pretty amazing. That's interesting. This area is huge. Particularly, for AIs trying to understand the built environment, right? And not a virtual environment, like a real environment. So that you could take a photo, like feed something a photo without having to have, and this is how Tesla's kind of trained their autonomous driving model apparently, is like you can just feed them photos effectively, which is video, just frames, and it can accurately understand the depth, the motion, and rapidly respond. It's super hard. Like that's such an insane engineering challenge. And they did that basically for cost reasons rather than having to rely on things like LiDAR, which actually bounces things off the walls or bounces things off other things. Yeah, that's cool. I want to check that out. So yeah, I'll spin back. So that's societies.io, like wild. I think this kind of, I'm really excited to explore other variants of this, which is basically agent simulation products.
Mm-hmm.
Like the applications are pretty broad and pretty wide ranging. This is marketing, obviously, because it's a lot more of a narrowband domain. You could use this to simulate all sorts of things.
All centered, what we've talked about is, it seems like to me, more centered around the marketing side, like campaigns, whatever, social media. But I'm wondering about like simulating business decisions as well. Or like if you have customers, you have clients that you work with, and you're trying to evaluate, hey, if we change our model or we do something different.
Yes. So I was thinking about that as well. So I think this is a simple example because content is simple, easy to distribute. Like it's relatively not easy, but it's easier to model, right? A distribution network and stuff. But business strategists have been trying to model out kind of understanding strategic decisions for forever, like Monte Carlo simulations, right? Like in any of those things, like
Yeah.
how many PhD/MBAs build Monte Carlo kind of spreadsheets all day, every day? Well, probably not as many as there used to be in today's world, but there are things that we haven't really opened up our minds about how you can simulate those but using these kinds of tools that are only available now because this app couldn't have been built before, really. Or if it was, it probably wasn't very effective. And we can build those things now. It's
Yep.
like, imagine this, simulate this. Like, I know there's a lot of simulation going on in very high-end manufacturing. Like, they're doing a lot of simulation around chip building and stuff like that to try and also in, say, material design, because simulations in that environment truncate production schedules to like massive orders of magnitude. I don't know. I kind of feel like it'd be great to just sit down with a pen and paper and just think about like, what are all the things that I wonder about, but I could never really get an answer to, and see if you could simulate them. Like, you could get pretty crazy. It's like, I don't know, like big decisions in life. Like, I want, because you know how at ChatGPT they talk about how like young people use it as like a therapist almost. I'm like,
Right.
is it really like a simulation? Well, it's like, this is what I know about you, and this is sort of like a simulation of what I predict is going to happen if you marry this person you've talked to me for 20 hours about. Like, imagine that world. That's crazy. But not outside of the bounds of reality now. Anyway, I thought that was fun.
No, I'm excited to check that out, man. And I was talking about like the hybrid architecture, and you might be able to better leverage local stuff. And even in that space, I'm wondering about maybe run batch like processing or things locally that just run constantly and don't cost you a bunch of money. It might run slow, and then you can pump it into things like that. I think there'll be a lot more use cases where we can actually leverage those combinations of tools.
Well, yeah, even in scientific discovery, and I think this is happening more and more. It's sort of like, all right, well, I'm gonna like I have this much empirical evidence based on experiments that I've been running. Could you virtualize a range of other experiments for me based on what's been going on, and how close would that be to like actual outcomes? Like, there's all sorts of crazy stuff you can do. I didn't have enough time to go through it, but basically what I went through is I was testing out Claude 4.1, and I'll push this once I've set it up to the demos area and to the vault. But then I've also got some prompts that I iterated on with Gemini, actually, to try and refine down. All right, if you wanted to try and build one of these, and here's the tech stack that you and I talk about a lot, you can go and check that out and try and run it and just play with it. And then also just, check out the GitHub link in the show notes. You can play with it.
We have so many like projects, and it's awesome, but I'm kind of surprised. It feels like every week build like a full app.
Just vibing our way to success, mate.
Just kind of on the side. Yeah, it's not like the main, but it's actually amazing because
yeah, it is amazing. Yeah, and if you are interested, there's way more like research reports, research papers that I went and scoured for social simulation and a bunch of simulation. Like, there's a lot of research actually in the social sciences that's pretty relevant for this kind of stuff around like social dynamics and those things that could be leveraged in this simulation kind of like concept. You could probably go into that world and just say, all right, well, that's some pretty solid research. Bang, bang, bang. Go and simulate. See if I can build a simulation around X. Just see what you can build. Like, that'd be amazing. And yeah, so I'll share some of that as well. Cool. All right. What else we got? We're running up on time. We could take a break there, and then
yeah. I mean, I'm good, however, but we're at 2 hours, and if we're going to talk like deep agents and stuff, I think that deserves its own. Like, that's not really like a 2-minute thing,
Yeah, that's definitely not a 2-minute thing. All right, do you want to leave it there, and then we can connect later on in the day to go through GPT-5?